At first glance, Claire Vilela of the Quinte Grannies for Africa doesn't seem like the kind of woman who'd suggest a nude calendar as a project for her and her peers to undertake. But you don't have to spend much time with the Grannies to understand what provoked 12 of them to strip down to birthday suits. It's their passion for helping others. The calendar project, an idea Vilela brought to the table, was designed as a fundraising campaign for the Grannies, whose main objective is to raise money for the Grandmothers to Grandmothers project run through the Stephen Lewis Foundation. The project provides funding to the countless African grandmothers forced to raise their grandchildren and other children who have been orphaned after losing their parents to AIDS.
Well, I looked around the room at these women and I thought, boy, the world needs to see more of these women. And so I suddenly thought of the calendar from England, which was shown here on the movie The Calendar Girls. And I said, do you want to do a calendar? And the reaction was, sure, we'll do a calendar.
But once the project was underway, Vilela says, it became a little difficult to coerce her fellow grannies to take it all off. Everything, that is, but the African jewelry that adorned the ladies for their photo shoots.
It's a little bit tricky to cover all the months. I think some of them were very shy, but eventually we got the 12.
Once the women were committed, Vilela says, the only difficulty was in the actual photo shoots and creating the comfort levels necessary for the Grannies to pose nude. Photographer Bob House of Belleville made all the difference, she says.
Bob House was wonderful. He really was. And we chose the sites. Some people had their picture done in the studio. Some, for example, I went to the county and had it done in a wonderful, wonderful garden of daffodils. And I think some of the picture taking was a bit tricky. You know, how much they were going to take off. But finally we got there, and we're very proud of our calendar.
Dorothy Davies-Flindall of the Grannies, who became Miss April, agrees that the hardest part was actually getting down to the posing.
Well, you know, as I say, it was easy enough to put up your hand and say, yeah, I think I'll go along with that. And then when it was time for an appointment and you sort of thought, I'm not used to doing this every day, you know.
But each of the Grannies involved had her own reason for doing so.
A way to because, I mean, I was part of the start when the Grannies for Africa started. I heard Stephen Lewis talk, and I mean, you can't but reach out.
And the controversy of nude photos only helps their cause, says Vilela.
That's why we chose to do it, was because it does fuel conversation and gets talked about.
Raising awareness is just as important as raising funds, the Grannies say.
I think it is going to bring in a lot of funding. But what's great is that in the last couple of weeks, I've been personally invited to speak to 3 groups, and I'm going to speak to another group next week. And as part of that, they might have, just because they've heard of the Granny group, but the calendar has kind of raised a little more awareness. So you get to go and tell people the story of what the Stephen Lewis Foundation is doing, what grandmothers in Africa are doing, and how strong and courageous they are, but how they need us to be with them in all that.
The Grannies met this past Wednesday on October 22nd to discuss marketing plans for their calendar and hosted a potluck dinner in celebration of the 2nd anniversary of the group, which was started by local women after they heard Stephen Lewis speak about grandmothers in Africa at a conference in Toronto. The ladies congratulated one another on their efforts, including the calendar project, which they hope will raise nearly $80,000. The calendar will also help raise awareness of Kazori jewelry, the Grannies hope. The jewelry company was started in Kenya by one woman and pays their workers fair wages.
She actually had a little shed in her backyard. Hired 2 Kenyan women to come in and start making these beads. And they're ceramic, it's all ceramic, and they're fired twice. and glazed and painted and polished. And it has grown. I think it's 300 employees now. And there's a wonderful website called KazuriAmerica.com, and it tells the story of Kazuri jewelry. Kazuri in Kenya means small and beautiful.
The Quinte Grannies are proud of their efforts and of their final product, says Vilela. These women work together so well, she says, because they truly believe in the cause.
Because a whole generation in Africa has been wiped out by AIDS and other diseases. And I think once you are a grandmother, I know that when I became a grandmother, it was quite overwhelming for me. I didn't envisage this huge feeling of emotion that would be part of being a grandmother. And then when you hear of your sisters in Africa who are struggling to raise 10 or 12 children, just one person, it's mind-boggling.
You know, when I think of myself having to feed and earn the money for 8 grandchildren, which they do over there, I couldn't do it.